Yeah, they picked that song special for today, Thoughts, because we're talking about our third unity principle. We've been doing this series now on our 5 basic unity principles, and it just so happens that number 3 has to do with thinking. Our third principle says that human beings create their experiences by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. And this is sometimes referred to as the law of mind action, which you will often hear a phrase like this: thoughts held in mind produce after their own kind. There's a little variation on that I prefer, which says thoughts held in mind tend to produce after their own kind. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Now, another name that's become very popular for this concept in the past few years is the law of attraction. I think most of us have probably heard about the law of attraction thanks to that book and the movie called The Secret. Anybody not remember The Secret? It was really quite the thing back in 2007. Especially when it was made into a movie. It really made quite a splash, and most Unity folks had the same reaction that I had to The Secret. They said, "What's the big secret? This is nothing new. We've been teaching this stuff for 122 years." But you know, sometimes it takes something like that to bring a concept into the mainstream, and boy did it ever. I recall in 2007, I think my favorite TV show at that time was a program called Boston Legal. Anybody remember Boston Legal? They actually had an episode that featured The Secret. The name partner in that show was Denny Crane. Denny Crane. He played insanely well by William Shatner. And Denny Crane was basically nuts. He'd carry a gun in his briefcase. And every time he did something crazy, he blamed it on mad cow disease, right? Denny Crane, he was crusty and crazy on the inside, but deep down inside, he was an egomaniac. I mean, it was through and through. So Denny Crane is in the conference room with the other lawyers, and he's telling them, "I found this great book, The Secret, and I've been following the instructions, and I'm trying to, and I'm gonna manifest." He wants to manifest Raquel Welch. He wants to have Raquel Welch walk through the conference room door. So he's concentrating, and there's a knock on the door opens, and look who walks in. Phyllis Diller. I just about fell out of my chair when I saw that. And I thought she was dead. So I mean, it was something of a miracle. I guess he really did manifest something. She's still alive and well today. I think she's 94 years old and still is making appearances and things. So God bless her. I love her. I think she's a hoot. So anyway, The Secret. 2 of the biggest criticisms that I've heard people say about The Secret was, first of all, it was very materialistic. It was all about getting stuff and money and things like that. And the other part was what I touched on before, that it wasn't really anything new, that this was basically drawing on principles that people have known about for a long, long time. Our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, has been talking about this concept from the very beginning. Here's what Charles Fillmore had to say on the subject. This is from his book, The 12 Powers. He says, "Humankind is the power of God in action. To humankind is given the highest power in the universe, the conscious power of thought." Then later on in another one of his books called Keep It True Lent, he says, "The thinking faculty in humankind makes each person a free agent, because it is our creative center. In and through this one power, we establish our consciousness. We build our world." How does it feel to think of yourself as the power of God in action? It's scary, yes, scary. A lot of responsibility in that. Does it feel kind of good though to know that you've got that mission in the world, that that's something that we can do and be? How does it feel to know that your thinking can actually set you free? Wow. And Charles himself here, he was simply tapping into some more ancient wisdom We can go back to the time of Jesus and we can hear him saying in the Gospels things like, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, that you can do wonderful things, move mountains even. You know, faith is just an attitude in consciousness. Or he would say things like, it's not what you take into yourself that defiles you. Things from the outside cannot defile you. What defiles you are the thoughts that you're holding in your innermost being. And even that was simply drawing on something that was even more ancient than that, because if we look at the Buddhist scriptures, the Dhammapada, we hear this: we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So, it ain't no secret. Now this doesn't mean that everything we think turns into physical reality. The principle is that thoughts held in mind tend to produce after their own kind. And I say, thank God that we don't produce everything that we hold in our minds or everything that we're thinking, even if it's something we hold on to persistently. I think it's a good thing. And if we take some time just to reflect on the events that have occurred in our own lifetimes, we can see that we most definitely do not manifest everything we think, even when those are things that are held collectively by a lot of people and with a lot of emotional charge behind it. I grew up during the Cold War, and this is the example I like to use. You know, during the Cold War, everyone in this country, I think, and probably everyone in Russia too, was worried that one country was going to nuke the other. And I remember asking my dad, I was saying, what are the bombs going to look like? What are they going to sound like when they come through crashing through the roof of the house and things like that? I mean, you know, kids have vivid imaginations. And then, if it wasn't worse, if it wasn't bad enough, kids would practice duck and cover. They'd have a drill where they'd get under the desk. They'd say, hey, the bomb has gone off, duck and cover. So we had this culture of fear, and everyone was thinking about this stuff. And yet, did we get nuked? Not that I know of. It didn't happen. Same thing with Y2K. That was another worldwide collective consciousness event. Everybody was worried about Y2K. Remember all the stuff that was supposed to happen? The clocks in our computers would go haywire, which would mean that airplanes were supposed to fall from the sky, power plants were going to blow up, and all of our banking records and everything else were simply going to disappear. And they tried to say that, well, and it was too late. It couldn't be fixed. Everybody was a little bit freaked out by that. I remember, I thought, well, I had some doubts in the back of my mind, but remember what really happened? They fixed it. They fixed it. Yeah, there were some minor problems, some glitches here and there, but no catastrophe. Life went on as usual. So, what happened to the law of attraction? With all of that collective consciousness holding those thoughts, didn't manifest it. So what does the law of attraction and our third principle have to say about stuff like that? Well, those were a couple of questions that were addressed in a Unity book called Sacred Secrets. And this came out shortly after The Secret made a big splash. This was sort of Unity's response to the Secret. And it's called Sacred Secrets, Finding Your Way to Joy, Peace, and Prosperity. It's written by a number of different authors. Each author has a different chapter in there. And one of the chapters was written by a friend of Karen and mine, Paul Hasselbeck, the Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck, who's the Director of Spiritual Education and Enrichment, and also the author of his own book called Heart-Centered Metaphysics. He contemplated the law of attraction, and he came to two conclusions. He said, we do not so much attract things to us as we are attracted to those things. And this happens through what I would call the law of perception. So he has a little twist on it. He calls it the law of perception. And this just plain makes sense to me. Paul says that everything that we see, feel, taste, hear, think, smell, all of those things are potential candidates for perception. And I say potential candidate because so many times a thing is in our sensory field, it's there for us to see or hear, but it's somehow not in our awareness. For instance, has anyone here ever gone around frantically searching for your car keys or your glasses? You got the car keys in your hand, right? Or the glasses are up here perched on your foot. Where are my glasses? You know, we do these things. Things are in our field of awareness, and yet we're still not aware of them. Things can hide in plain sight. It happens all the time. The information that actually enters our conscious awareness is just a small fraction of the stuff that's available, but that we filter out. It's the way our brain works. It's our state of consciousness that does the filtering. The filtering is done by our assumptions, our beliefs, and the quality of the thoughts that we're holding. That's what determines what we perceive and what gets filtered out. So what this tells us is that our perception is shaped more by the information that we're already holding in our brain. The thoughts that are held in mind are shaping our perception. The classic example is buying a car. I want a green Volkswagen Bug, all right? So I start thinking about it, visualizing it, imagining what it would be like to drive one, to go to the dealership, to have the keys handed to me, to take it on a test drive, and actually signing the contract and being able to bring it home. And pretty soon, what starts to happen? You see green Volkswagen Bugs everywhere, right? Did the universe just make something appear that wasn't there? Or am I now perceiving the world with a heightened and more attuned sense of awareness? Seeing things that have been there all the time, but I just haven't had my consciousness aligned with it. Did we attract them to us, or did we attract ourselves to them by shifting our perception? Again, our Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore explains it like this. He says, "It is the law of spirit that we must be that which we would draw to us. If we would draw to us love, we must be love, be loving and kind. If we would have peace and harmony in our environment, we must establish it within ourselves." So there's individual work that has to be done. There's action that has to be taken. And one of the things I think that they left out in The Secret was the action step. You can't just sit there and visualize and imagine. There's an action step. We have to embody it. We have to be immersed in it. I think that's what Charles was getting at there. And when we decide to immerse ourselves in it, we become it. We're not drawing it to ourselves. We become it. We embody it, and that's a lot more powerful than just attraction. If we would draw love to us, we must be love. We must be loving and kind. Some of the lives of our most famous spiritual teachers really exemplify this in action. Jesus and Gandhi and Dr. King. They exemplified the values of love, peace, and justice. And through that, they embodied it. They embodied those values, and through them, and through their actions, there was a lot more love and justice and peace that came into the world. And yet, think about it. Even though they embodied those things, even though they held these thoughts of love, justice, and peace in their consciousness, they were the victims of violence. They each met a violent end, which, again, just goes to tell us that this is not about manipulating external reality. We are trying to embody these things so that we make the world a better place. We are attracting ourselves to people, situations, and things through our beliefs and attitudes that help us to get in touch with that creative spirit that's at the core and the source of all existence. It's not about controlling anything out there. It's about getting in alignment with the creative principle that's at work in the universe so those principles can act through us and actually be us. I think that's another way we can define God. We talked about this in connection with our first principle. Another way we can define God is the eternally creative, evolutionary impulse of the universe. That's principle with a capital P, the creative advance into a new and more powerful expression of the true, the good, and the beautiful. So as soon as we become aware of our connection to principle, consciously aware of it so that we can embody it, an interesting thing can start to happen in our lives. We don't really care so much about getting and having things, because when we're in alignment with that principle, we know that we already have everything that we need in order to do the work that we're being led to do in the world. That's the real definition of prosperity, I think. It's always having everything that we need, whether it's money, possessions, relationships, health, whatever it takes to fulfill our purpose in the world, to know that we have these things. Wouldn't it be great to not want anything? Wouldn't it be great to be free from desire? Wouldn't it be great to look around us and to honestly be able to say that no matter what's going on, I have everything I need. I am already in this moment whole and complete, lacking nothing. I'm one with Source. I have everything that I need. Wouldn't that be liberating? Yeah, we all want stuff. I mean, let's face it. There are things that we want, and it's no problem to want things as long as we don't feel incomplete without them. That's the key. It's okay to want things as long as we don't feel incomplete if we don't have them in our lives. Eric Butterworth, I think, ultimately gives us a really useful and brilliant restatement and example of how our third principle can work. This is according to Eric Butterworth. He says, things may happen around you, things may happen to you, but the only things that really count are the things that happen in you. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control what we think about what happens. And what we are thinking is our life at any particular moment. That's from his book, Discover the Power Within You. So that brings us to an important question. Here's the big question. How much control do we really exercise over our thought process? That would seem to be an important thing in light of what Eric has to say. Do we consciously and intentionally regulate the content of our thoughts? Because, again, based on what Eric says, that's what it's all about. We can't control what happens around us, but we can control the way that we experience what happens around us. We can control the way that we think about it. And again, no secret here. We can go back even before the time of the Buddha now. We can go back to the time of the Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, where they said this. They say, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. That goes back a long, long way. And one of the ways that we conquer the mind, or at least exercise a degree of control or mastery over the mind, is by a combination of prayer and meditation. In fact, that's the primary purpose of prayer and meditation as the way we teach it in Unity. Prayer and meditation are consciousness conditioning tools that help us to conquer the ego mind so that we can get into alignment with that creative and evolutionary power of the universe. That's actually our fourth principle, and we're going to be talking more about that next week. So hope to see you then. Thank you.
All of the things that I am grateful for. Early in the morning is the dawn of a new day, new hopes, new dreams, new ways. I open up my eyes and I open up my mind and I wonder how life will surprise me today. Early in the morning is the dawn of a new day, new hopes, new dreams, new ways. beautiful